All right. Welcome to the Daily Word Bible Study, a plain and simple book by book, chapter by chapter, and verse by verse study through the entire Bible. We are in Luke's Gospel, chapter 21. So we're going to spend a couple of studies on end times. And so we're looking at it again from Luke's perspective, a Gentile. Matthew's and Mark's is from a Jewish perspective. Although, of course, Jesus was speaking to a Jewish audience, and thus, Luke he will give his view as Jesus gave it to a Jewish audience. But you will see how his perspective as a Gentile, it's going to come out. He's not going to it's not what I was looking at. He's not going to um well, a lot of the Jewish references that Matthew gave, Luke is not going to give. So let's get right in it because again, end times is always fascinating. Now, here's another thing. Especially in light of we're coming up on the end of August here. And what has been so popular for some reason, there is a flood of verses of end time predictions. Now I'm dealing with this in other videos on the channel BP the Bible Perspective and other channels, but there are and then of course I've even dealt here on the Facebook page, excuse me, the Facebook page, where I'm critiquing a lot of the methodology that people have, that people use. In other words, the methodology that people use um, to arrive at their view. And usually, let me just say this, not usually, without a doubt, all of it is faulty interpretation. So this kind of, what I'm seeing a lot about September, which is just next month, just 10 days from here, I think, right? 10 days from this date here. So going into September, and I think it's somewhere around September 23rd, that you have people predicting that Jesus will come. Now, on my Facebook page, if you go back and you will look, a few days ago, you will see that I have I have a one that I can't show it here, but there is a if you go back a few days, you'll see where I did a live where there was a guy that says, he talked about, let me see if I can pull it up right quick. When he talked about, let's see, he talked about, okay, he talked about, I'm going to try to get the title here. But I'm also, okay, here it is. It was just 2 days ago. I'm sorry. And then it was the title of the video is The Rapture in September. Okay, so the rapture in September. So I did this video. So his methodology, his methodology that it's two faulty methodologies that he used. I mean, methods that he used that is wrong. One, he uses math. There's all kinds of funny math, but he never fails, and you have to kind of listen to people, that he never makes the connection how he arrives at September 2025. So the other thing is that he uses the Jewish festivals. He used Jewish festivals and the Feast of Trumpets, which is the harvest, the harvest festivals. Um, Under the law of Moses, and that's the other faulty. He's using, he's calculating end times as if God was using the Jewish calendar under the Mosaic law with the three festivals that every male had to attend. Now we see this throughout Scripture. In fact, as we are studying Luke. And so we're just, again, just within the last week here in Luke, within the last week, the reason why Jesus is in Jerusalem is because of the Passover festival. And so Jerusalem is crowded from all over. The Jews who had been scattered all over the world, the devout Jews would make the trip and they would come to Jerusalem to attend the feast. And typically this was done 3 times a year. And so this is why when you study, as we get into Jesus last week, it's because it's the Passover festival of the Passover that Jesus is going. The time of the Passover, Jerusalem is crowded with people. You see this the same with in the book of Acts. Excuse me. When the outpouring of the Holy Spirit is because again it's another festival, and Jerusalem is crowded with people because of this festival. Well, this guy uses, and again, a lot of the people, they use the Feast of Trumpets, which is the harvest, as the kind of measuring rod to say this is how we know that the rapture or end times is going to happen, in September. Now, again, they don't explain how. They just kind of rattle off a lot of stuff. Math. This particular guy, math, all kinds of, again, faulty math. So again, let's take a look and see if you see this in this in whatever the heck that he's talking about. All right, so here we go. Luke chapter 21, and then verse 5. He says, and this is kind of course, parallel to Matthew 24. So he says that as some were talking about the temple complex, how it was adorned with beautiful stones and gifts dedicated to God, he said, these things that you see, the days will come when not one stone will be left on another that will not be thrown down. Okay, so Jesus makes this prediction, this prophecy about the destruction of Israel. Now, this came to pass in AD 70, so just some 40 years from when he spoke this. Verse 7, teacher, they asked him, so when will these things be, and what will be the sign when these things are about to take place? Now, Matthew's version has 3 questions. When will these things be? What is the sign of your coming and of the end of the age? Verse 8, then he said to them, watch out that you are not deceived, for many will come in my name, saying, I am he. And the time is near, don't follow them. When you hear, now I'm always amazed. Here you see Jesus clearly stating that there would be many false prophets, and yet even to this day, there are people who claim to be Jesus. There are people that claim to be the Messiah. Okay, and what is the Lord's command? Don't follow them. Then he says, when you hear of wars and rebellions, don't be alarmed. Indeed, these things must take place first, but the end won't come right away. Now, I do see that a lot of times people are upset over the troubles in the world. What did Jesus says? You're going to see that, but the end is not coming right away. Then he told them, nations will rise up against nations and kingdoms against kingdoms, and there will be violent earthquakes and famines and plagues in various places, and there will be terrifying sights and great signs from heaven. right? So then, but before all these things, so all of these terrible places. Now, here, this is an insight to a lot of the judgments that will happen during the tribulation period. Or if you read Revelation chapter 6 through 19, all of this, you see a lot of this stuff taking place, these judgments uh, on the ungodly world. But notice what he said. But before all these things, they will lay their hands on you and persecute you. They will hand you over to the synagogues and prisons, and you will be brought before kings and governors because of my name. Now, you do see that as a starting in the book of Acts. It will lead to an opportunity for you to witness. Therefore, make up in your minds not to prepare your defense ahead of time, for I will give you such words and wisdom that none of your adversaries will be able to resist, or contradict. Excuse me. You will even be betrayed by parents, brothers, relatives, and friends. They will kill some of you, and you will be hated by everyone because of my name, but not every hair of your head will be lost, but in your endurance, gain your lives. Now, you see a phrase like this, it's more of a euphemism because a lot of them lost their heads, a lot of them were beheaded. It is believed, if I'm not mistaken, that Paul was beheaded. So a lot of Christians suffered death. So, of course, what is the point here? You won't be. In other words, the worst that can happen to you as a believer. And this is something we should kind of reckon with. The worst that could happen to us is death. Now, in some cases, there are believers that die gruesome death. During the first and second, excuse me, the first and second century, up to the third, the beginning of the third, that was one of the most severe times that Christians suffered persecution and from the empire. So in other words, the entire empire was persecuting Christians. Now, since that time, you've had persecutions. Even today, there is persecutions. There's persecution. There is severe persecutions. Some Christians are being tortured, jailed, and even martyred. But not like it was during this period of time when, again, you had the entire Roman Empire that was trying to destroy Christianity. Okay, and there was such brutality. They would have these bouts of. They would have these bouts of, persecutions throughout that period of time, and some Christians, they, some Christians were used as human torches. They would boil them in oil and light them on fire and hang them on poles. Others were, it was called a human slide, where it was a greasy slide that they would just slide you down, but then when you got towards the bottom, there was a razor kind of up in the middle that would slice you in half. And of course, there's the feeding to the hungry lions and things like that. And it's also even children. So when you look at a phrase like that, what is actually being preserved? Not your physical body, okay? And then when he says without a hair, your hair would be lost. Well, a lot of people did lose hair, but he's talking about your essence, your soul, your spirit. Um, and so we're still living in that period of time. We're still living in that period of time. Let me do this here. I'm going to go to Daniel chapter 9. I think I can illustrate this Daniel chapter 9. If you've been with me, you've seen this many times, but Daniel chapter 9. I want to read a prophecy, and then I'm gonna share something else and show you where I'm going with this. Okay. Daniel chapter 9, verse 24. So this prophecy, the book of Daniel, is one of the most fantastic prophecies, especially about end times. But listen here, he says, verse 24, 70 weeks are decreed about your people and your holy city, to bring a rebellion to an end, to put a stop to sin, to wipe away iniquity, to bring in everlasting righteousness, to seal up the vision and prophecy, to anoint the most holy place. These 70 weeks, which is 70 sets of 7 period of time, notice what he says, are decreed about Israel, Jerusalem, and the temple. This is Israel right here, so the nation of Israel. No one understands this as from the issuing of the decree to restore and rebuild Jerusalem until the Messiah, the Prince, would be 7 weeks and 62 weeks, or 69 weeks. That's important. It would be rebuilt with the plow and the moat, but in difficult times. But after those 62 weeks, the Messiah would be cut off and have nothing. So right here, remember the prophecy, 70 weeks, or a week is a 7, or 7 years, 70 sets of 7-year period of time. But here's the interesting thing right here. So as we look back, 69 of those weeks have transpired. 69 of those weeks have transpired. So watch this. The people of the coming prince will destroy the city and the sanctuary, and the end will come with the flood. Until the end there will be war and desolation and decree. He will make a firm covenant with many for 1 week. But in the middle of the week, he will put a stop to sacrifice and offerings, and the abomination of desolation will be on the wing of the temple until the decree of destruction is poured out on the desolator. Now, the reason I read this is because these 69 weeks was a prophetic countdown, stopwatch. If you go back to the book of Ezra, chapter 1, and historically, the King Cyrus of the Mede and Persians, this whole prophecy came because Daniel was reading Jeremiah, and he came across the 70 years of exile that God had pronounced on Israel. He's reading this and he's realizing these 70 years are almost up. And that's why he got praying and fasting, and the angel Gabriel appeared to him and gave him this prophecy. Now, from this perspective, just a few short years ahead, this is when the 70 years will be up. They're already in the kingdom of the Mede and the Persians. And what happens is that the kingdom of the Mede and Persians, under King Cyrus, he issues the decree according to God's decree. After 70 years, he says, God is, hey, give me this wisdom here. Y'all go back to the land and rebuild the land. You can read this in the book of Ezra and Nehemiah. Okay? The thing about it is that when King Cyrus issued that decree, he started this 70-week countdown. All right, so from a historic perspective, 69 of those weeks have come to pass. They've already come to pass. 69 of those weeks have come to pass. But here is the thing that we need to understand. 69 weeks, Jesus, it brings us right to Jesus. It brings us to the death, burial, and resurrection of Jesus. So now what we're waiting on is this last week. So here are the indicators. How do we know we're not in that last week? Verse 7, he will confirm the covenant with many for 1 week, but in the middle of the week, he will put a stop to sacrifice and offerings, and the abomination of desolation will be on the wing of the temple. Now, if you will remember in Matthew chapter 24, In verse 15, Jesus says, when you see the abomination that makes desolate, spoken by Daniel the prophet, we're reading this. And then he says, go flee to the mountains. So here's where we're going to pick up with the abomination that makes desolate. That hasn't happened yet. We haven't seen that yet. Nowhere. You can't say anywhere. We haven't seen that. So we're still waiting for that 70th week. But here's the problem. Now, it's not a problem, but here is the issue. It has been 2,000 years. So the 69th week happened at the time of Jesus. We haven't seen the abomination that makes desolation. We're still waiting for the 70th week to happen. So what is going on right now? I'll get into that in the next study. Don't forget to like and share this video and subscribe to BP The Bible Perspective. And as always, if you have a thought or comment, add it to the comment section below. All comments are welcome. And I will see you in the next study. All right.